Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Thank you. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhamsa Pravikacharya Ashtratasha Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhamsa Pravikacharya Ashtratasha Shri Srimad Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Primse Koho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Hananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Pramanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Prabhupada. Naram Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Hirdayet Nasta Prayod Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, should we read the disappearance first?
I'm sorry?
Should we read about the disappearances first before Srimad Bhagavatam?
I don't know, what do you think about it? What do you do? I read them before. Yeah, I read that, but you can read it before.
Okay, we'll read about the disappearance of Sri Mahesh Pandit. It's a short one. Sri Mahesh Pandit, the seventh of the 12 Gopalas, tasting Krishna Prema, used to dance like a madman to the sound of a huge kettle drum. Especially dear to Sri Nityananda Prabhu, he traveled and preached with the Lord. He established deities of Gauran Nitai Gauranga, Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, and Gopinath. In Vraj Leela, he serves Krishna Balaram as a cowherd boy, Mahabahu. His samadhi is in the 24 samadhis area. And then Sri Udarana Dutt Thakur. Udarana Dutt Thakur, a Dwadash Gopal, lived in Saptagram, a cluster of 7 villages: Krishnapur, Nityanandapura, Vasudevpura, Shivapura, Bansa Bedya, Saha Nagar, Saptagram. Raised in luxury within a family of gold merchants, he later married and worked as a wealthy state minister. The place where he once held office is today called Udarana Pura in his honor. Lord Nityananda would often stay in his home and accept food from his hand. Performing Premanam Sankirtan in Saptagram, Lord Nityananda delivered the entire community of bankers and gold merchants. Udarana Dutt said that Saptagram is such a holy place that simply by seeing it one is freed from all sins. When he was 26 years old, his wife suddenly died. He left everything to associate with Sri Nityananda Prabhu and preached the glories of Krishna's holy names. He personally installed and worshipped deities of Sadbhuja Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Gadadhar Pandit. He serves Lord Balaram as Subahu Saka in Vraj Leela. His samadhi is in the 24 samadhis area. After glorifying Udarana Dutt Thakur as an exalted devotee of Lord Nityananda who worshipped him in all ways, Krishna Das Kaviraj praises all of Sri Nityananda Prabhu's devotees. No one can count the unlimited followers of Nityananda Prabhu. I have mentioned some of them simply for my own purification. As branches of Lord Nityananda's tree, these eternal associates are full of the ripened fruits of Krishna Prema. They gave these fruits to everyone, flooding them with pure love of God. These devotees have unlimited strength to give eternal, unalloyed love of Krishna. They can offer anyone Krishna Prema. Yes, Samaga?
Just one small thing also about, this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, about Udarana Dutt Thakur. I'm kind of surprised it wasn't mentioned in there, but it stuck out to me because I thought it was very interesting. That actually, Udarana Dutt Thakur, his, the gold merchants, the Suvarna Varnik community that he delivered in Saptagram, eventually settled in Kolkata. and it's like the caste that Srila Prabhupada, his family was a part of. So he has a connection to Udarna Datta Thakur, and it's in a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He describes how he would go to Saptagram and he would visit the deities that Udarna Datta Thakur installed, Shadbhuj Gauranga. Anyway, so I thought it was kind of interesting little connection there.
Thank you, Mogalila Prabhu. So we'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 3, Text 20 and 21. Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu, Kumāras, Kapilo, Manuhu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam, Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu, Kumāras, Kapilo, Manu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam, Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu, Kumāras, Kapilo, Manu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam, Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu, Kumāras, Kapilo, Manu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam. Please chant. Oh no, if you can chant.
I think they just want you to repeat this one here. This one. Here. Swayambur Narada Shambhu.
Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu.
Kumāras Kapilo Manu. Prahlado Janako Bhishmo. Balir Vyasakir Vayam. Swayambur Narada Shambhu.
Kumāras, Kapilo, Manu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam, Swayam Narada, Shambhu, Kumāras, Kapilo, Manu, Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo,
Swayambur Narada Shambhu. Kumāras Kapilo Manu. Prahlado Janako Bhishmo. Balir Vyasakir Vayam. Swayambur Narada Shambhu.
Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu,
Kumāras Kapilo Manu.
Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam. Jamal. Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu,
Kumāras Kapilo Manu.
Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam. Prakash, please. Prahlado, Janako, Bhishmo, Balir, Vyasakir, Vayam. Anyone else? Bhaktaras. Swayambur, Narada, Shambhu,
Kumāras Kapilo Manu. Prahlado Janako Bhishmo. Balir Vyasakir Vayam.
So I'll chant the next verse. It'll follow. Dvada Shaiti Vijanimo Dharmam Bhagavatam Bata Guyam Vishudam Bodham yam gyatvam ritam ashnute. Synonyms: Swayambhuhu, Lord Brahma; Naradaha, the great saint Narada; Shambhu, Lord Śiva; Kumāraha, the four Kumāras; Kapilaha, Lord Kapila; Manuhu, Swayambhuva Manu; Praladaha, Prahlad Maharaj; Janakaha, Janaka Maharaj; Bhishmaha, grandfather Bhishma; Balihi, Bali Maharaj; Vyasakihi, Shukadev, the son of Vyasadeva; Vayam, we; Dwadasha, 12; Eti, these; Vijani Maha, no; Dharmam, real religious principles; Bhagavatam, which teach a person how to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhataha, O my dear servants. Guyam, very confidential. Vishuddham, transcendental, not contaminated by the material modes of nature. Durbodham, not easily understood. Yam, which. Gyatva, understanding. Amritam, eternal life. Ashnute, he enjoys. Translation: Lord Brahma, Bhagavan Narada, Lord Śiva, the four Kumāras, Lord Kapila, the son of Devahuti, Swayambhur Bhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, and I, myself, know the real religious principle. My dear servants, this transcendental religious principle, which is known as Bhagavata-dharma, or surrender unto the Supreme Lord and love for Him, is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. It is very confidential and difficult for ordinary human beings to understand. But if by chance one fortunately understands it, he is immediately liberated, and thus he returns home back to Godhead. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna refers to Bhagavata-dharma as the most confidential religious principle. Sarva guyam tamam guyataram. Krishna says to Arjuna, because you are my very dear friend, I am explaining to you the most confidential religion. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Give up all other duties and surrender unto me. One may ask, if this principle is very rarely understood, what is the use of it? In answer, Yamarāja states herein that this religious principle is understandable if one follows the paramparā system of Lord Brahmā, Lord Śiva, the four Kumāras, and the other standard authorities. There are 4 lines of disciplic succession, one from Lord Brahmā, one from Lord Śiva, one from Lakṣmī, the goddess of fortune, and one from the Kumāras. The disciplic succession from Lord Brahmā is called the Brahma sampradāya. The succession from Lord Śiva, Shambhu, is called the Rudra sampradāya. The one from the goddess of fortune, Lakṣmī, is called the Shri sampradāya. And the one from the Kumāras is called the Kumāra sampradāya. One must take shelter of one of these 4 sampradāyas in order to understand the most confidential religious system. In the Padma Purana, it is said, Sampradāya vihinaye mantraste nishpala mantaha. If one does not follow the 4 recognized disciplic successions, his mantra or initiation is useless. In the present day, there are many apa-sampradāyas or sampradāyas which are not bona fide, which have no link to authorities like Lord Brahmā, Lord Śiva, the Kumāras, or Lakṣmī. People are misguided by such sampradāyas. The Shastras say that being initiated in such a sampradāya is a useless waste of time, for it will never enable one to understand the real religious principles. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostade Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sita Devi Pranamami Hare Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sandibhya Evacha Patithanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So these are the Mahajans, or the authorities. I was distributing books, and it was a man, he was from India, and he took a book, he gave a donation through electronic means, what is it called? Square. And after he took a book and I charged his card, his last name was Mahajan. So I said, excuse me, sir, you're an authority. He said, what do you mean? And I just started laughing to myself. So the Mahajans, these are the, you can say, great devotees that understand Bhagavata-dharma. Just like in a court, one should quote from law books, and then his statements will have weight to it. And Srila Prabhupada, he didn't like this. I think, I believe, in my opinion, perhaps, maybe, he didn't like it. Why? Because it indicates guessing or speculating. Last Thursday, Krishna Lounge, there was a young man, he asked Balaram a question. He asked, because Balaram was asking, who are we? What is the purpose of life? So the young man asked Balaram, I would like to know, who are we? What is the purpose of life? And then he said, not textbook answers. So he said, from your own experience, what do you think we are, like that? So Balaram gave an expert answer. So schools, they encourage their students to start speculating. What do you think this means? What is your explanation on this? So they, so from the beginning, we're already conditioned or have the habit of speculating since we began going to school. That's why Srila Prabhupada, he would call it spiritual suicide. These materialistic school systems. And so this challenging mood of, I don't think we should do this, or I think it should be done like this, can actually stunt our growth in spiritual life. And so what's the proper mood? Humility and submissive hearing from authority. Just like Srila Sanatana Goswami. All of the great Goswamis, they were very humble when they approached Lord Nityananda Prabhu or Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when someone is humble, it's compared to a good seed. A good seed is planted in a fertile land, it'll grow. But if someone has a good seed and the land is barren, it won't grow. So the heart should be humble and meek, and then it can receive transcendental knowledge. And I personally have seen and heard and read that a lot of devotees, they unfortunately have left the movement because they couldn't accept the authoritative statements in the Srimad Bhagavatam or from Srila Prabhupada. And the big example is the moon landing. When people heard that we didn't land on the moon, they had a very hard time dealing with this. And so when I went to Colorado with Yamarāja, they invited us to the Boulder University, and they had a little club there. And so what they had us do is we sat in a circle, and everyone was given the chance to express what color they felt. So everyone was saying, oh, I feel like a green today because I'm very optimistic, I feel like a purple because I'm spiritual. They were, yeah, he was there. So Maharaj and I, we just looked at each other. So when it came to Maharaj, Maharaj said, well, the color I would choose is saffron, you know, like that. And then so everyone has their own opinions, their own statements, but what is it based on? And I remember whenever I approached my spiritual master, His Holiness Bhadranath Swami, he would ask me a question. And when I answered what I think, he would cut me off. He would say, go make sure, like that. So we shouldn't speculate. We have to make sure. We have to be confident. And so this word, durbodam, it means not easily understood. Difficult to understand devotional service for those who have not been trained or associated with devotees. And I remember, you know, who can understand the devotees, right? Like what Balaram Prabhu always says. Who can understand the pastimes of the devotees? So the karmis, they cannot understand the devotees. What are our activities? What are we doing? Just like when we distribute books, people look at us and say, oh, you don't want to find a job, you know, you don't want to have a regular job 9 to 5. You're just out here selling books. So I tell them these are not books. You know, these are the most valuable pieces of information you'll ever read. And Prahlad Maharaj, he recommends that spiritual life should begin as early as possible. Just like when you go and see someone special or someone important and you want to give them a bouquet of flowers, do you give them a flower that is a bouquet of flowers that are withering, old, dried petals? No. How will that person feel? That person might feel offended. But even if it's just one flower, but that rose is very fresh and bright, then it has more meaning when given. So similarly, when we give our life to Krishna, while we're still youthful, and while our minds are still thinking straight, then we should do that. But a lot of people, they feel like, oh, I'm too young to enjoy, or I'm too young to dedicate my life. So then they go on about their life, and then most of the time they forget about Krishna. And in the Ramayana, King Janaka, he says, the success of a gift depends on the intention it was given. So when we distribute these books, what are we hoping for? Are we hoping for a big score? Are we hoping to get some recognition? Or are we really trying to help them? So we should strive to be Krishna consciousness as best as we could and offer our youth, our intelligence, our life to Krishna before it's too late. So there's a lost child. He's looking for his father. And he goes to every man that he sees and asks, are you my father? Are you my father? He can go on interviewing billions of people, but he will never come to the right conclusion. So what's the answer that Srila Prabhupada would say? You ask the mother. So then the mother is the authority. She can say who is the father. I remember when I was young, I was probably 3 or 2 years old. My mom, she came here to the States, and I don't really remember how she looked like. So when she came to visit us, to bring us here to the U.S., my father, she told me and my brother, go hug her, that's your mom. And I looked at this lady, and I didn't recognize who she was. And in the Philippines, you know, it was very simple. So she had stockings on, and I didn't know what those were. So I thought she was an alien. So I started crying. I said, no, she's not my mom. So my dad, he kind of pushed us to hug my mom. And if you can imagine 2 little boys hugging this woman and crying. So I didn't know who my mom was, but my dad, he told us, he assured us, this is your mother. She went to travel and she came back. So we need to go to authorities. And a lot of people out there, they offer their advice, knowledge, but if they don't belong to these 4 sampradāyas, the Brahma, Rudra, Shri, and Kumāras sampradāya, we don't take them very seriously. Because Srila Prabhupada explained that we human beings have 4 defects, conditioned souls. We have a tendency to cheat. Our senses are imperfect. We are prone to be illusioned, and we commit mistakes. And the example is that a drunk in the mode of ignorance, he's so intoxicated, he looks up and he sees 2 moons. So if a sober person tries telling him there's only 1 moon, he gets angry. So this drunkard, he's convinced that there are 2 moons. And Srila Prabhupada would say that a drunkard is compared to like a person haunted by ghosts. He would speak so much nonsense. So these people that don't belong to these sampradāyas, they speak so much rubbish. The goal of life is to accumulate as much as you can. There is no God. There's no life after death. And when these innocent people, they're attracted to these so-called yogis or gurus, they are misled, and then they don't get a chance to chant Hare Krishna. Another example is like the poor animals in the desert. They're running after a mirage of water, but they don't find water. So they end up dying. And so we have a lot of imperfections, defects, and we should admit that. I asked a young man, I said, "Excuse me, how are you helping society?" He said, "I'm the answer to society." And this man, he was homeless, and so he had this idea of he's the best gift to the world. So I tried offering him a book, but he said, "No, I don't need a book. I'm perfect." So I smiled and I said, "Thank you, have a nice day." So there's an animal in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's called the musk deer. So this musk deer, it emanates a fragrance from its sweat glands. And it gets so intoxicated by the scent, it wants to chase the source of this scent. So it goes into the forest, and it goes here and there, and it can't find this scent. Eventually dies out of exhaustion, and then a hunter captures it, extracts the secretions, and then that's the end of the poor deer. So similarly, human beings, they're chasing after material happiness in this forest of illusion, and somehow we can't find happiness. And then death comes, we're taken to Yamarāja, and then we're punished for severe, you can say, punishment. So I was distributing books, and I tried this new tactics. I would put the books facing to the left and to the right. So that way the people passing by, they can read what books we have. And this Mataji, she said, "Hiding in unnatural happiness." Like that. So she started walking. And from here to the door in the lobby, she came back. And she said, what is this book about? So I gave her the book, and I love quoting. It's by His Holiness Devamrita Swami, his book. I like to quote the quote from Robin Williams. And he said, "Isn't it funny how I can bring great happiness to all these people, but not to myself?" When people read that, they can relate to it. So I told him Robin Williams, he had everything. He had wealth, fame, followers, but for some reason he wasn't satisfied with that. So they become curious of the book, and I told them, "Give this book a chance, it might change your life." So they take a book, they gave a donation. And just like a machine that has a flaw, it's not seen by the naked eye. So whatever it produces will also have a flaw. So we human beings have flaws, and we are trying to make perfect machines or instruments. Isn't that silly? Like our microscopes and telescopes. And a lot of scientists, they think that they're seeing planets or stars. But that's actually not what they're seeing. And they say there's no life on other planets. How do they know that? They don't. So then they go on speculating. So we need the Shastras, we need the spiritual master to cut through our illusions, to cut the doubts in our mind that prevent us from advancing in devotional service. And that which is blocking the mercy of Shri Shri Radha Giridhari, the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and the mercy of our acharyas to enter our heart. And there was this one man yesterday. He said, how do you know this is real? He was pointing at the Bhagavad Gita. So I told him, how do you know the pyramids of Egypt are real? So he said, I asked him, have you been there? He said, no. So I said, how do you know? So then he said, I've seen pictures, this is the example that Maharaj uses. And then so he said, I've seen pictures that somebody can be photoshopped. And I said, oh, I read it in books. So I said, how do you know if that book is true? Like that. So then ultimately it came down to faith, right? If we have someone that we trust and they tell us that the pyramids exist, then we believe them. So similarly, the devotees, we acknowledge that the Mahajans, they're the authorities. And when they tell us that there is life after death, there is a higher purpose to human life, then we believe them. And so he said, that's interesting. And I said, you should give this book a chance. He took a Bhagavad Gita, and then he said something interesting. He said, I never read books like, because he was materialistic. And he said, I never read books like this, but I'm going to give this a chance. And I told him these books, they help you to understand what is the goal of life. And it's funny because Bhishma Dev, he's one of the Mahajans. But in the battle of Kurukshetra, he was going against Krishna. Right? Why? Why was Bhishma Dev on the other side? Do any of you know? Yeah, thank you, Prakash. He was siding with Duryodhana because you can say he was maintaining them. And he made an oath that whoever sat on this throne, I will see my father's image. So even if it was someone like Duryodhana or Dhritarashtra, he had to accept that. And it's funny too because he actually shot arrows at Krishna and Arjuna. Bhishma Dev, one of the Mahajans. So Srila Prabhupada, he explains that Krishna was actually taking pleasure when he was being shot by Bhishma Dev because he was his devotee. And then he said, you're going to make me break my promise to Arjuna that I won't fight. So Bhishma Dev, so we can understand the relationship between the devotee and Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada, in 1934, he said that his Guru Maharaj, when he was living, he was discussing the Upanishads. So he was discussing Upanishads regularly, and the Babajis, there were many Babajis in Radhakund. So first they came to hear Bhaktisiddhanta, this learned scholar, and he established the Gaudiya Math. So out of curiosity they came, and when they saw that he was discussing Upanishad, gradually they stopped coming. So Srila Prabhupada, he says, my Guru Maharaj recommended that these people are not living in Radhakund, they are living in Narakakund, in hell. So Prabhupada said, I have heard it personally. Therefore, we should turn karma into bhakti. Whatever we do in life, we should dovetail Krishna consciousness in that activity. And then Prabhupada said, if we strictly follow the regulative principles and avoiding offenses and chant the mantra faithfully, this is the beginning of religion, and that is the beginning of liberation. But liberation shouldn't be the goal for the devotees. It should be Krishna prema, love of Krishna. And so here it says Amrita Ashnute. And so that means the nectar of immortality. I remember Bhakti Jamal Prabhu, he asked Amoga Leela about the suras and the demons having that great fight, the churning of the milk, of ocean of milk. And so they wanted to get this nectar, and whoever drank it, they would have immortality. But Krishna turned into Mohini, Murti, and so she took the nectar and she distributed it to the demigods. And so by drinking this nectar, one becomes immortal. So Srila Prabhupada, he says, by drinking the nectarine of devotion, one becomes immortal. That was nice. And so he named the book The Nectar of Devotion. You drink it and you become immortal, that's all. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the CC, Adi Lila, he says, I order to everyone to distribute this Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Let people eat these fruits and ultimately become free from old age and death. So that's what we're doing. We're giving people an opportunity to live forever in the association with Krishna. And Prabhupada, he says that our attachment for this world is illusion. And everyone's thinking, without me, everything will be spoiled. My presence is required. And you can see this in political leaders. They're old, but they still want to occupy the post of president or being a minister. And in Vedic times, the kings, once they reach a certain age, they would take sannyas. They would start renouncing. But when you ask the people in Congress, please leave your post and pursue spiritual life, how many of them will take to it? So they're so attached to their post. And so I'll conclude with a few Sankirtan stories. I remember setting up by Vijay Prabhu, and he said, you can't set up here. And then he said, back in the good old days, if a devotee was distributing books at one school, he won't allow another devotee to be in the same school. So he said, this is my hallway. So he kicked me out. So I moved a little further. And then there was this lady, she was looking at my book table. And she said, I have this book, the Bhagavad Gita. And I said, really? Because, a lot of people, they say, I have a Bhagavad Gita. And then she said, but I have another book by the same author. So she reached down into her backpack and she pulled out a book. It was a Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto. And then she said, can you tell me more about this book? And I said, this book, there's 12 cantos in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so I told her that this 8th canto has pastimes of Gajendra, the elephant, the churning of the ocean of milk, and so many other pastimes. And then she was interesting because she knew a little bit of Sanskrit. She knew a little bit of mantras like that. So when I gave her the events guide, how we study the Srimad Bhagavad Gita Monday through Wednesday. We have Krishna Lounge on Thursday, one on Friday in South Bay, and then we have a big gathering on Sunday. She was so enlivened. She said, thank you, I'm going to try to make it. So, and I asked her, how did you get these books? And she said she would walk and she would go to these little libraries. Do you know what these are? Yeah. So she said she saw the Bhagavad Gita, and she said she was so attracted to the cover. That is it yellow or orange?
Yellow.
Okay. Yellow, orange. So she said I was attracted to this color, and then I've always heard about the Bhagavad Gita, but I never had a chance to read it. So she found the Bhagavad Gita in a little library. And then in another library was the 8th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. So I don't know who distributed, who's doing these, but thank you.
You're supposed to put those back to you.
I don't know. She kept it. And so, and you meet a lot of people. They say, no, no, no. And Bhakta Dimitri and I, we were at La Jolla Whole Foods. We were doing walking book distribution. I got a lot of no's, but Dimitri, he did nicely. And so I approached this woman in her car. I knocked on her window and I said, excuse me, do you like to read? And thank goodness she put her windows down. So I gave her a Bhagavad Gita and I gave her the Hiding in Unnatural Happiness. And then after our talk, she said, thank you for coming to my car like that. She said, I'm interested in this. And she said, I always love reading about self-development. And I said, these books, they're life-changing, like that. So she gave a donation on Venmo, and then she took off. And also you meet families, and it's been a few times where they say, "Thank you for stopping us. We really needed to hear this." And I was speaking to one gentleman at my book table, and a random guy walks by and says, "How much for the Bhagavad Gita?" And I didn't know who to talk to. So I said, "We just asked for a donation." He gave $20. And then he says, "This book has all the answers." And he walked away. And then the man seen that.
This one said, when you talk about Bhagavad, you talk about the soft.
Mm-hmm. And then the man saw the interaction and he said, "I want to get a Bhagavad Gita." So he gave a donation, and so people, when they hear about the Bhagavad Gita, the knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita, they're inspired to take the book and they want to start reading it. And there was
I'm sorry, but what about those little cards?
yeah, we put them in there. Mm-hmm. There was a man, he said, "What's the difference with this Bhagavad Gita and other Bhagavad Gitas?" So I said, "Would you prefer iron or gold?" And he started laughing. I said, "You take this is the gold version." And a few more. There was a young lady. She said, "Why do you have so much red on?" Or "Why do you have so much orange on?" So I said, "I'm an undercover monk." She said, "Why?" And I said, "I've been kicked out a few places." And she said, "Why?" And I told her, they don't want us to distribute these books. So she became curious. So I flipped the cover and I told her this book inspired Gandhi, Emerson, Thoreau, like that. They were so fascinated by the knowledge in this Bhagavad Gita. So she said, "Can you show me a little bit more about this book?" So I showed her about the mind, how it can be your best friend or worst enemy. And then she was so interested in the Bhagavad Gita, she said, "I want to take two, one for myself and one for my friend." So she said, "How much?" And I said, "How much do you think this book is worth at a bookstore?" And she said, "Around $20, $30. I said, "You're close." So she gave $40, and I gave her a set, and then I invited her to the Krishna Lounge. And I'll save the best for last. But there was a lady, she was from Argentina. And when I was showing her the books, she asked me, "Do you have a tissue?" And I said, "A tissue?" And I said, "I only have this handkerchief." And she said, "No, it's okay." And I said, "Why?" And then she said, "I'm going to get emotional." She started crying right there. So, and I asked her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm just going through a lot, you know." Because the question that I ask is, how is your mind treating you? So anxiety, stress, people, they are full of those. And so without the devotees going out, who can they rely on to? Who can they rely on to give them proper answers, explanations that make sense? And during the Christmas marathon, I met a young man and an old man. He was his grandpa. And he said, "You gave us a book a year ago." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And then I said, "We have this nice set now for Christmas." So before he left, he said, "You Hare Krishnas and the Bhagavad Gita are the only ones that make sense in this world." So he was actually, he was vegetarian because he came to one of the programs in LA. And yesterday, as I was packing up, I met this man named Mario from Yugoslavia. And then, yeah, well, that's what he said. And then so he was jogging, and then he turned back and he said, "Are you Hare Krishna?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "I haven't seen you guys in over 30 years. So I told him I'm considered the second generation of Hare Krishnas. And then he said he was a film director, or he makes films. And then he said, "I interviewed the Christians, the Muslims, like that, the Buddhists. And when I saw the Hare Krishnas, I was so attracted." He said, "Why?" He said, "They were jumping up and down, they were beating drums, you know, they were vegetarian." So he said, "I've never seen any people like you guys." And then he actually knows the philosophy, he's vegetarian. And then he said something, he said, "But I was, so we were discussing, you know, what is the goal of life?" And then he said, he said I fell into Maya. He admitted that and then I said, why are you know Sanskrit? And he said, I read the Bhagavad Gita. And then so, long story short, I asked him, do you have a Bhagavad Gita as it is? And he said, I probably have one, but I'm not sure. So I gave him a free paperback Bhagavad Gita. He was so grateful. He asked me to sign his book. So I signed his book and I wrote a little message. And then at the end, he said, thank you for your conviction and your devotion to spreading Krishna consciousness. And then I thought I was just going to shake his hand, but he came to my table and he gave me a hug, like a nice hug, you know. And he said, thank you, brother. And I said, you're welcome. And then so, you know, you don't know the type of people that you meet on book distribution. And it never hurts to try to approach anyone and everyone. And Dimitri, he told me this story yesterday, or there was a man, or you wanna explain it? About the Krishna consciousness?
Oh, yeah.
The tattoo?
It was in the Balboa Park, and I met this couple, and I saw the guy had a tattoo on his neck, and it said Krishna consciousness. And I asked him, how did you get that tattoo? And he said that my girlfriend, she was next to him, she this movement, this philosophy, this path changed my life. And I also asked the lady, she said that my grandma, she taught me how to chant Hare Krishna, and I've been chanting since a very early age, like for 16 rounds every day. And she also taught the boyfriend to chant. And like this, when they met, this chant and the philosophy changed his life, so he decided to make a tattoo here. He put a Krishna consciousness.
In San Diego?
Yeah.
Did you get their number?
I know. But I invited them to.
If you have a card, if you give a card, it really helps.
Yeah. So book distribution, if one can taste the nectar of it, it's a very joyful service actually. It is a form of austerity though, but we shouldn't let noise bother us, you know. And I remember here Jamal, he was my old Sankirtan partner. We'd go to Mesa College, we'd go to so many schools. We even went to, what's that called, December Nights one time with Raja Mohan. I remember it was 3 devotees and 1 table. Remember that, Jamal? There was like a bunch of rush. The people just kept taking books. We lost track, and it was a nice service. So, yeah. I think that's also what attracted people, like, what the heck? You know, there's someone from this, like that. So anyway, I'd like to end there. Is there any questions or comments before we end class?
Yeah, I got it. But yesterday,
Seto, he mentioned how the sons of Daksha were convinced by Narada Muni to renounce. You know, they were supposed to get trained up to be householders and populate the universe, but they renounced. You know, and so there was a riddle. There was kind of Narada kept asking them questions, and they had all the answers. And if you don't read them all together, there was each verse ends with the same line, Kimasat karma bir something like that, which means what's the use of karmic activity? They were all set to engage in household life, and they did that. Now the reason I bring that up is because it came to mind when I looked up the verses. There's like 9 of them that end up with that same last line. It's quite fascinating. I remembered a class, I think that Devanrita Maharaj gave many years ago, and he was going through this thing, and he brought to the attention that he focused on that last line. Therefore, what is the use of karma? What is the use? And it suddenly dawned on me that book he wrote, Hiding in Unnatural Happiness, also touches on those same themes. And maybe I think got inspired to write that book from that renunciation song that the what is it, Haryasvas and the Shavalasvas, the Haryasvas. So I didn't get to mention it yesterday, so I thought I'd call your attention to it. Maybe when I give class, I'll quote some of those verses. Because it's a nice song of renunciation,
Mm-hmm.
8th canto.
Yeah, when I tell people that I'm trying to be a monk, they always ask me, I want to be a monk. How can I move in? So I don't want to go to the four regulative principles, but people they want to become monks, they want to live a simple life, and they want to have a more meaningful, satisfying life, not just getting Starbucks and walking their dog. Okay, Grand Taraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna, nice class, Prabhu. Nice discussion. Thank you, Haribol.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Mataji.